move on to Egypt now, and we'll ask Lina to tell us a bit about the story of Egypt and what you think it, how you think it compares to Banter's idea of the ethics.
So, good afternoon, everyone. I can't help but remember this Iranian artwork when Jazz was talking about the Tunisia story. It's basically an artwork called Freedom is Boring, Censorship is Exciting. I'm not suggesting it. I'd like to see more censorship, but there is a lot of similarities when it comes to this evaporating energy right now in online spaces. And although we are in a context where the public is far more networked thanks to digital mediation, there's also this loss of energy. But to be a bit more structured, so in the research in Egypt, what we try to do is first try to tap into the community of early adopters of online spaces and understand how they functioned online as a community. And then we try to map the evolution of this community as more people came online, particularly around the uprising in 2011 and the years to follow. And then reaching up to the point right now and where we're at. And it was very interesting to reflect with groups of early adopters through, community meetings, focus groups that we've organized. It was very interesting to see how they talk of themselves as a community of more or less like-minded people. There isn't so much of a strict ideological connection between this group of early adopters, but there is a basic mutual or shared values amongst them that make their presence online much more collaborative, much more. There was far more debate than what we're finding right now, and there were fewer people, so debate was obviously easier. It's also important to understand that this community, unlike a little bit what Iskandar described, was a community that was equally active offline. In fact, it was, in many cases, people's offline activism predated their online activism or came hand in hand with their online activism, or people's online activism was an extension of their offline activism. But the main thing is that these people managed to utilize the online spaces as propositional spaces for a different kind of a political language, a different kind of a political imagination to the offline world. And this changes as we move forward and as many people come online. So we don't really have this, especially with regards to the early adopters, a dichotomy between offline and online politics, in the sense that people were just actively engaged in all these spaces. But it was very interesting how online spaces shaped a lot of the political language, the political imagination of this group of people and the other people with whom they engaged when they would go to protests. So blogs became sites of conversations at protests. Later the tweets as well, and so on. And then with time, we have a very similar and expected phenomenon of many more people joining the online spheres. And we have some sort of more realistic network public sphere in the sense that many more people are connected through digital tools. But this is also a moment where people, particularly early adopters, started describing the online sphere as more of a society and less of a community. Again, the seminal soundbite that we have from some of our interviewees is that the ground came online with us. So there was always this sense that people online had some sort of an unspoken exclusivity, not something that they chose, but they were definitely taken aback with more people coming offline. In fact, one manifestation of this sense of being taken aback is that One early adopter told us how he felt that when more people came online, it showed him how there was a failure amongst these, young political elite who were, digitally savvy. Their failure to engage with the wider public, and in fact, the joining of more people online reminded him of, a certain difficulty and certain challenges with, political engagement offline, and hence, the deadlock that the revolutionary movement is facing right now. But another aspect or another manifestation of more people coming online is that we find more often at the same time a different sort of a mimicking of the offline world online. So I said before that what was interesting about a smaller group of people being online is that the online sphere sort of informed or proposed different political imaginations to the offline spheres. And this is less of the case now. We are interfacing with a condition where hegemonic state narratives or state politics in general are what we find more online today. So a more concrete example of this transformation is that it was very interesting how it was the early bloggers community and with them citizen journalists who were pushing very hard on economic and social rights issues. So labor unrest, but not only socioeconomic issues, but also in general civil and political rights. So torture is something that, as we all know, the early bloggers community took on and managed to sort of penetrate in the public consciousness through their accounts, their videos, their testimonials, and so on. Right now, although we see some of these things, but they are more easily diluted because, as Jazz said, there is just far more content. But also what's much more prominent online in terms of the conversation is a reflection of the identity politics that is taking over the country and that is to a large extent engineered by the state. So again, we have a predominant, Islamist, anti-Islamist divide, or whatever you want to call it, military Islamist divide online, which is very reflective of what's going on offline. So we see the offline sphere sort of controlling the online sphere with what's being debated, what's being talked about, with narrative, and we see less of a propositional space coming out of the online spaces, and accordingly there is also the question of being lost in the crowd if you're trying to push for alternative language, alternative imaginations, and so on. There is a dilution. All these things are things that by Johan Ecker, in his notion of the network public sphere, he does talk about centralization in terms of powerhouses controlling the network sphere because of money or power or whatever. So this is something that we're finding with the state or with even mass media controlling online spaces to a large extent right now, with very much more present online versions of these mass media. He does talk about fragmentation, so too many people saying too many different things. So less debate and more fragmentation, and and a replication of a mass media model, basically online with just a few more channels. So I'll leave the conversation about glimmers of hope for it's not so bad, but it's a bit bad.
Nagra, do you have?
I just have a quick comment to add on what Lina has very nicely said. I think one of the things that we have found throughout our focus groups and interviews with the different groups on the ground, just an extension of what Lina said. I mean, the tensions that we see and that are reflected in Bentler's theory are really sort of a reflection of what you see in the digital economy. So when you look at the impact of the technologies, again, on the possibility of empowering small players, of digital technologies moving economies one step further to the model of the perfect competition, let's say. I spoke earlier about empowering the small player. So on the one hand, you see this is happening, the impact of technology creating horizontal platforms where voices are heard and people have a chance to participate. On the other hand, you find that digital technologies can also perpetuate hierarchies that are very much established, very much top-down, and that in the digital economy represented, let's say, by the large conglomerates, large financial conglomerates or large hierarchical companies. In many ways, when you look at the network public sphere in the debate on political issues, you actually see a reflection on this. Berkman asks in his book, is the network public sphere too concentrated, too fragmented, or, and then he answers saying in 2006 that it is just right. I would argue that we need to put a question mark on this. If we look at, as we look at the Arab public sphere, do we really have the right balance? Do we have, Dina has quite rightly pointed to the taking over of the public sphere by large media, by the state, by the culture of the hierarchies. We have anecdotes from Muslim Brotherhood on how they use the social media, and it is exactly how they function offline. So, quite rightly, Dina pointed to there is a blur between what is online and what is offline. It is one and the same, really, at least from our findings on the ground. And at the end of the day, we need to really question to what extent has these conflicting trends, these conflicting forces away from the center and towards the center taken over in Egypt. I don't have a clear answer, but I don't just quite feel that it is just right. There is more to the story, and that's also something to reflect on maybe future research.
Thanks, Mike. So I think at this point we can get the audience involved a bit and have a round of Q&A. We will take a few questions and then answer them. Questions?
Hello everybody, my name is Raj Sharif. I'm a senior program officer at the IDRC Cairo office. Excellent work, of course. I would like to start with actually a very simple question, probably, to start to get the conversation going. What you found in this project is extremely important, and I'm very proud that this project is contributing to the literature, not only in the Arab world, but globally. This is something that we should be proud of. As I said, my question is a little bit simple because I want to see more analysis and more thinking going on. So you said that the blogging sphere, the enthusiasm about it died down after some years. Saudi Arabia was mentioned as an example. And that Twitter took over this one. My question, does your research say anything about reasons? Like, for example, was it convenience? Like the 140 characters? Was it like the audience? Now I have more people to follow me and I can reach out. Or was it just like a change of behavior? I'm really bored, it doesn't really give me a lot of reward and satisfaction that I'm blogging and only 5 people asking, reading my blog. And the reason I'm asking this question is that what does that tell us about the Twitter? Are we going to see the same thing happening in 2017? And if so, where is this online, offline intersection of blogging still going on? Thank you very much.
Can we take another perhaps two questions and give our answers? There was a question here. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Ahmed and I work in the intersection between technology, the law, and freedoms. And a few years ago, several years back, actually, I was more active in that last week that we were discussing, and perhaps I think I appeared on more leadership or early maps that Go has worked on. My impression, actually, to nothing to substitute, but my impression is that the maps that I have been looking at do not, in my mind, reflect the entire dynamic that goes either between different parts of those people behind the accounts. In my experience, the most critical and the most important connections, communications, and sometimes relations took place not only in a private sphere and in the electronic not, but also sometimes completely offline. And I think actually I'm asking if whether your methodology has any component to it that tries to measure the dynamic that doesn't take place and can be immediately measured and computed, looking at to the accounts and the relationships, especially because people tend to follow and unfollow discussions and accounts on based on different habits. So that's one. I don't know if you can speak to that. And my other impression to follow on what Nina has been saying is that I didn't feel frightened or annoyed that the public sphere, the public discussion taking place at such as the technologies arriving online. For me, this actually is an indication that finally the online component is becoming normalized. It's becoming the public sphere. What would be annoying is to find the same type of restrictions that you see elsewhere in the public sphere that's not online. To see the internet failing to remain the place for the weaker, the disciplined, the excluded. I think that internet is a more democratic medium in that sense, and if the internet loses this more relatively compared to other media, compared to the press, broadcast, meetings in all the streets, then
Great, thank you. Do you want to take the okay, who would like to take the question?
So I'll try to field both of those quickly. I'll take the second first. So the blogosphere maps and the Twitter maps are using analytical techniques based on the links between these things, and that's what they reflect. And the maps, in a sense, they draw themselves, and then researchers go and look at the maps and try to understand what's notable there once the structure is already gone. They do not and have no way to say what's important or not important, and they have no way to say the difference in the prominence between what is public and manifest in these maps and what is private and hence unobservable. So, we're at a point in which digital media, we have a lot of data. It's very, very powerful, and we can do a lot, but we can't do everything, and we can't understand how the unseen and the unspoken compare to the public version of that. So we have blind spots, and this is why we always need to take multiple looks at these things. So we draw these maps, and they require the field work that these folks are doing. They require the interviews. There's a lot more to the picture that the maps by themselves can't. So thank you for that point. I should have stressed that more from the beginning. Ryan, your question about shifting platforms is a really important one, and it's a hard one. I think, so the shifting platform is the aggregation of many individual level decisions. And we know in looking at blogs over time, or even Twitter accounts over time, there is attrition. People get tired, they get bored, they get angry or mean, and they leave. And new people replace them. You have multiple platforms. It's a question of whether the ecosystem can support these different platforms. And the answer is maybe, but maybe not. And I think in this case, it's not completely winner take all, but it's going to be winners take all. And you're going to have probably only a few platforms where, as you say, if you want audience, right now the place to get audience is on Facebook and Twitter. And if you're still blogging, really harder to get the same level of attention. Should we worry about that? I don't know, maybe, probably a little bit. As long as there is a viable network of public sphere, I think that's fine. I think the thing we should be worried about is whether the kind of the innate attributes, the affordances of these platforms enable the same kind of exchange of ideas and deep thinking and evaluative work that we saw at times in the best of the blogosphere, where we're still seeing that.
Well, just one comment about what Amr said. I wanted to share an idea. That's the comparison between studying the natural public sphere as an object of science and also studying, for example, the universe and the stars. So what we are studying here is only the public sphere, meaning there are parts of this universe, the natural public sphere, that are unobservable for us, including the private conversation. So this is a clear limitation, and you're right to put your finger on it. But at the same time, studying the universe for like centuries, while we can't observe all the universe, we only can see parts of it that we have the light coming to Earth. It doesn't. Actually, scientists can see beyond what's observable by applying models of and rules of physics to have deductions about the invisible. And here it would be interesting if in our field of work and research, if we could reach one point where even the unobservable NPS or people's minds, some parts of it are observable. We see it in tweets and social media, etc. But I can't read your minds now. I can't read yours. But it would be interesting if someday we find the rules, or physical rules of this NPS, and then we might be able to predict more phenomena and to have more better governance of this space. That's.
Thanks, Jazz. Nadia, do you want to go first?
I'd like to make a couple of comments. I think Amar's point about the maps, that's actually the beauty of working together, because we have done a series of field work and sort of validated with our colleagues. And in some cases, whenever there were images of what's happening in the natural public sphere that sort of supports what we find on the ground from fieldworks and research that we have done. But also, I really like what you said about the ground coming online, and I don't think this is something that upsets us. On the contrary, it was presented in a certain context by one of our interviewees, but this is precisely what we are seeing, and the fights that we see in social media are only representative of what we see underground, and we like to think of this as our path to reach, to be able to debate, and hopefully with time, this will be part of what we are undergoing, part of everybody's engagement, everybody's involvement and participation. Personally, I would like to see less fights, but hey, that's part of what we are living, and that's part of what we share and part of in our surroundings. I'm very troubled by the predominance of the hierarchies, by the predominance of the mass media invading and sort of feeding into the polarization that we see around us. That upsets me very much. Like you, I'd like to see more of that centrifugal power of technologies to enable, provide everybody with a voice, even if it leads to, fights online. Fine, we are, this is what we are living, and this is part of, everybody voicing their opinion. I'm very troubled by the mainstream media and certainly by the state going in and going through the paradigm of the top-down, and that bothers me very much. And this is why this point in Dunker's book is very interesting for me to explore further. What are not only the political control, but also the economic, market concentration. Who are the players? Big players are those who own the mainstream media outlets, and they are the ones who got the chance to go in and present their views and feed into the polarization that not is happening around. This is part of what we are living and the transition that we are living. So just my comments.
Very good. I guess we can, at this point, take just some closing remarks from our panelists, and there's something you wanted to mention or that you didn't get a chance to, and then if we have a few minutes, we could take a few other questions. Well?
Okay. Well, during this research, we have been confronting lots of information, lots of data, and one of the challenges is make sense of these data to understand. And one of the anecdotes we have in Tunisia is we had the elections last year, legislative and presidential, and we said to ourselves, is this data we have able to predict or at least understand what do people think about these candidates? Are we able to learn something from what is being published online and how people engage with this publication? Are we able to use this information to at least know or have a prediction of how people will vote? And we did that. Actually, by just using the comments of Facebook, we were able to predict how much people will vote for each candidate, and we had a less than 5% margin of error, and that was better than the two of the three main polling agencies. And it was predicted. We had the results before we had these numbers before the results. So we tried this in the first tour of the election, and we said, oh, okay, maybe it's a coincidence. So we did the second tour, and we had the exact same results. We had less than 5% margin of error. And what this tells us is maybe the data of the NBS has a predictive power. We still don't understand what are the rules for it, but my personal intuition is it's the oil of the social sciences.
Yeah, I mean, I think Amr, your question brought up the part that I was saving for later, but that was very well said by Nagila. Yeah, we now are seeing the function of the re-function of the network public sphere to democratization, in the sense that it is very interesting to see so many people share their views and their thoughts online. It's very interesting to see people like my own mother write lengthy posts on Facebook about what she thinks of the political condition in Egypt and whatnot. I think the question really is that there was a hype around connecting the network public sphere to mobilization, particularly around the uprisings. And that's not too surprising because of the highly political/dissident nature of the online sphere before and around the revolution. And what would be interesting is to see how these dissident practices can permeate a much more inclusive online sphere. So we're yet to see that. We're yet to see how, again, different people can be influential just because they have interesting thoughts, not because they have a lot of money, not because they can buy followership, not because they can boost their posts and pay Facebook a lot of money to do that. Also on the question of blogging versus the less blogging and all that, I think, again, as Rob said, it's an aggregation of factors, but it's interesting to also see how the notion of social media and the immediacy of people talking to each other and at each other sort of replaced or revamped our consumption of the online sphere. it's normal that blogging became more of a lonely process when Facebook is there, and it's very interesting how Facebook is actually moving people a bit away from the open web to this all-inclusive network where everyone is talking to everyone and sharing thoughts and sharing links and so on. So it's interesting to see what the internet did to us, besides also how we are differently socializing with the internet.
So I'll just throw a couple of concluding points out. So I'm very much taken by what Jazz is saying about the ability to learn more about the network public sphere, and so I think we've done quite well. But the more we dig into this, the more we understand how complex it is to study this, and how there's going to be a lot of work to do to better understand this public sentiment. There's undoubtedly more and more information that is public and studyable than was before. And I think we as researchers, as well as people in public policy and business, need to approach that with a humility and respect that we didn't before, that there's so much out there that we need to tread carefully as we do this as well. So we're going to continue to learn, and we look forward to that.
Thanks, Rob. I think we've just run out of time, and it's time for a quick coffee break. And I'm sure our panelists would be happy to carry on the conversation if anyone still has any questions over the break. And we'll start again at 5:45. All right. Thank you.